All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our RBT practice exam series, where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. You're teaching a non-vocal client to use a communication device by pressing a button to request snacks. Initially, the client rarely touches the device. You decide to use shaping to teach this skill. During the first phase, you reinforce the client for simply looking at the device. After several successful trials, the client consistently looks at the device. What should you do next according to shaping procedures? Starting with a pretty straightforward shaping question. Remember, shaping is reinforcing approximations of behavior until we reach our final terminal behavior. And what we mean by approximations are steps and responses that get closer and closer to our final behavior. In this case, we want to teach the client to press a button to request snacks. So that's going to be our terminal behavior. Right now, the client doesn't touch the device. So you decide your first approximation is going to be the client looking at the device. So for shaping, you would start by reinforcing anytime the client engages in the behavior of looking. After a while, the client is now looking at the device. What is next in the shaping procedure? A. Continue reinforcing looking at the device until it becomes automatic. With shaping, especially in the beginning, you want to try to move quickly through your approximations. So once it's shown that the client has relatively mastered an approximation, you really want to move on and not stay on one approximation too long. B. Move to reinforcing a closer approximation, such as reaching toward the device. Yes, now that they're looking, let's get closer to our terminal behavior of pressing that button to request snacks. Read all of our answer choices. C, immediately require the full button press before providing reinforcement. Even though we want to move or try to move as quickly as possible, we don't want to jump too far ahead. So going from looking at the device to going to the full button press might be too big of a jump for this client. So with approximations, you want to be smart about how you're choosing your approximations. D, switch to a different communication method since looking isn't the target behavior. Well, that doesn't really apply. The target behavior, or the terminal behavior, is pressing the button to request snacks, and we're trying to get there through approximations. Looking is just an approximation. So what we want to do now is move to reinforcing a closer approximation, such as reaching toward the device. You're conducting discrimination training to teach a client to identify animals versus vehicles. You present pictures and ask which one is an animal. The client correctly identifies animals when they are presented alongside vehicles. But when you present two animals together and ask which one is an animal, the client appears confused and responds randomly. What does this likely indicate about the client's learning? All right, interesting question here. We're looking at the indicator of what the client is learning or how they're learning. Now, we know we're using discrimination training. And discrimination training is teaching someone to distinguish or identify between two or more stimuli. In this case, we're trying to teach them to identify animals versus vehicles. And it seems like you've done that successfully because when you say which one is an animal by a vehicle, they are able to identify the animal. So that's good. However, when you present two animals together and you ask which one is an animal, they appear confused. And so clearly this skill has not been taught enough or is not strong enough to move past a animal and a vehicle which really look nothing alike. So what does this indicate about the client? A, the client has mastered discrimination and is ready to move on. Well, maybe they've mastered animals versus vehicles, but if you have two animals together, they get confused. So we're not ready to move on. We're not trying to move as quickly as we can through skills, right? We want to make sure those skills are properly taught and mastered before going to something else. B, the client may be responding based on the position of items rather than the features. Well, the issue here is it doesn't say anything about the position for animal versus vehicles, and it doesn't say that they are choosing an animal when two animals are together. They just respond randomly. So it doesn't appear they're picking based on position. C, the client is using stimulus over selectivity and may be attending to irrelevant features. It actually looks like the opposite, because if they can do animals versus vehicles, which features where these two stimuli don't really have similar features, but then you get two animals which have these relevant or similar features, that's when they struggle. D, the client has learned to discriminate animals from vehicles, but not animals from other animals. As simple as that sounds, it's the right answer. In a lot of cases in ABA, the simplest answer is often the right one, and this is what is happening. They can discriminate animals and vehicles, but not animals from other animals. So that may be our next target behavior. How do we discriminate certain animals from other animals? Your client typically loves goldfish crackers and will work hard to earn them during sessions. Today, the client arrives at the session having just finished lunch. That included goldfish crackers. When you offer goldfish as a reinforcer for completing tasks, the client shows no interest and refuses to work. What has changed in this scenario? So let's think about this scenario. Something changed, right? We know the client loves goldfish and works hard to earn them. So it appears goldfish are reinforcing. They're acting as reinforcement. Today, the client ate goldfish crackers at lunch. Now just stop there and think, common sense, what's going to happen? Let's say you love chocolate cake, and after work, you're excited for chocolate cake when you get home. But that day at work, you eat chocolate cake during the day. And now when you get home, you're not so eager for the chocolate cake. Why? Well, you've already gotten it. You've satiated on it. In this case, if the client just had goldfish, and now they don't want goldfish when they usually would, it's very likely they've satiated on those goldfish crackers. This is why often when we have strong reinforcement, we try to limit it maybe to just sessions so satiation doesn't occur. So this is the question we've basically predicted the answer. So let's find it. A, the reinforcer has lost its effectiveness permanently. It must be replaced. Well, no, they still love goldfish. They ate them at lunch. The value has just dropped because they've already had them today. B, the motivating operation for goldfish has been decreased due to satiation. Sure, they've already had their goldfish. They might not want them anymore, so what's the reason to work to earn them when they've already gotten them today? So we want to be careful about satiation. C, the client is engaging in escape-maintain behavior. Doesn't necessarily indicate that. Maybe, right, they're not working, but it's much more likely given the information, they just don't want to work for the goldfish. D, the abolishing operation for task completion has increased. Again, not necessarily. The issue, given the information, and you always want to use the information given in the question, is with the goldfish crackers. That's our focus here. That's what the information is guiding you towards. There's an issue with the goldfish crackers. They've already had them, and now they're satiated. So what's changed? Well, B, the motivating operation for goldfish has been decreased due to satiation. You arrive at a client school to provide services and discover that the classroom teacher has made modifications to the behavior intervention plan without consulting the supervising analyst. The teacher explains that the modifications work better in the classroom setting. The teacher seems well-intentioned and the changes appear minor. What should you do? It always becomes tricky as a behavior technician when you're going to somebody else's environment, especially a classroom, because you're not in charge and your supervisor is not necessarily in charge because it's that teacher's classroom. And while you still must do what's best for your client, you still got to consider you're in that teacher's classroom. So in this case, if you go to provide services and you see that your behavior plan has been modified by the teacher without consulting the analyst, that's an issue, right? And that's an issue for the BCBA because that's their BCBA wrote that treatment plan a certain way, trained you a certain way, and was it implemented a certain way. So now you're in a tough spot because it's a well-meaning teacher, right? Small changes, but it's not what you were trained to do. It's not what the behavior analyst wrote. So it's your job as a technician here is always to follow your behavior analyst lead. You don't want to cause conflict and you don't want to overreact to this, but you can't go by what the teacher changed. You've got to go by what your supervisor has already trained you to do. We're ABA professionals. We implement ABA. We don't know what changes the teacher has made. You've got to follow what your analyst originally wanted. So what should you do? A, implement the teacher's modified version since they know the classroom environment best. And they might, but before they can modify anything, they have to talk to your analyst and they both have to agree on that modification. B, refuse to work with the client until the teacher follows the original plan exactly. Well, that's not your decision to make, and you don't want to harm the client because changes are being made without the analyst's knowledge. You're still there to work with the client. C, implement the behavior plan as written and inform your supervisor about the teacher's modifications. Yes, you've got to just continue the BIP as written before the modifications, and then let your supervisor know what the teacher made, what changes they made. Then the BCBA can go in, talk to the teacher, and they can decide how to move forward. But you don't refuse to work, and you don't use modifications that aren't approved. You've just got to do the BIP as you know how to do the BIP. D, compromise by alternating between the original plan and the teacher's version. Again, you don't want to do that. We don't know what modifications were made. Maybe the modifications are worse. Maybe they're better. That's not your decision to make. Do what you were trained, provide the best service to client, let the supervisor know. So C, implement the BIP as written and inform your supervisor about the teacher's modifications. Your client engages in appropriate requesting behavior by saying break please during a difficult task. When the client makes this request, you allow a 2-minute break from the task. Over time, the client's appropriate requesting increases. You notice that the client's problem behavior has decreased since implementing this procedure. What behavioral principles at work? Let's finish with a consequence question. Reinforcement, punishment, extinction. Remember, we're always looking at how behavior may have changed. Reinforcement increases, punishment decreases. We know the client is engaging in requesting behavior by saying break please. That's great. When the client makes this request, you give them a break. A break counts as what? The removal of the task. And so if this behavior increases, which it does, appropriate requesting increases, you've used negative reinforcement. Negative, we've removed the task, taken it away. Reinforcement, the behavior has increased. So now the behavior principle at work is going to be negative reinforcement. It's not positive reinforcement because the consequence is removal, and it's not punishment because the behavior increased. So it has to be reinforcement. We've taken something away. It's going to be B, negative reinforcement. Thanks for watching. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. Very shortly, we're going to have our updated RBT task list video out, and we're going to start moving on to the new RBT task list that is coming out in 2026. So if you're still watching this right now, you're still likely going to be taking the current version. 2026, there should be changes to the RBT task list, and we're going to start focusing on those soon. But as always, the material or the science behind it doesn't change, so these are still relevant throughout even next year because you're still going to have to know reinforcement, punishment, and everything else. So keep focused, keep working hard, keep studying hard, and we'll see you soon.